Hi guys, in this video, we will talk about vulnerability management lifecycle. As you saw in previous video, we discussed vulnerability assessment. Make sure check that video first. The National Vulnerability Database is updated with thousands of new security vulnerabilities each month by the National Institute of Standards and Technology. All of these vulnerabilities don't need to be monitored by security professionals. However, they do require a means of locating and eliminating those that could endanger their systems. That is the purpose of the vulnerability management lifecycle, and we must comprehend it in its entirety. Any security flaw that can be used by hackers to compromise a company's operations, structure, or functionality of a network or asset is called a vulnerability. The life cycle of vulnerability management is a continuous and iterative cybersecurity procedure that involves locating, evaluating, ranking, and resolving vulnerabilities to enhance an organization's cybersecurity posture. The life cycle of vulnerability management and explains why it's so important for any cybersecurity program in a business. Additionally, it provides some best practices to bolster the vulnerability management program in your company. You may ask that, what is the difference between vulnerability management and vulnerability assessment? A vulnerability assessment is a component in the life cycle of vulnerability management. Finding vulnerabilities and determining the potential danger they represent to your company is the phase in the assessment process. On the other hand, vulnerability management lifecycle aims to utilize the assessment results to develop projects and establish priorities for evaluating and addressing those vulnerabilities. Many organizations are dependent on interconnected technologies. This surface includes a higher volume of internet-connected devices and increased integration of networks and systems. New devices typically have default settings and credentials, but many people fail to change them. Armed with the same default login and password, a threat actor looking to exploit a device could easily gain access. This means cybercriminals can steal your data, lock you out of your device, invade your privacy, and even cause physical harm when in control of Internet of Things and operational technology machinery. There are many different vulnerability management frameworks, but the vulnerability management lifecycle of most organizations today, an advanced cybersecurity technique called vulnerability management lifecycle, can assist your company in identifying and addressing security flaws before they become an avenue for an attack. Here are the 6 steps of the vulnerability management lifecycle. Number 1. Asset discovery and prioritization. You can use a variety of strategies to get full coverage. These can include network scanning tools, endpoint detection systems, asset inventory tools, and IoT device scanning. There is also agent-based discovery, which involves software installed as agents on devices to help asset discovery. For example, a cloud agent could be installed on a virtual computer to deliver information about cloud assets. It is important to prioritize scanning and uncover vulnerabilities for critical assets first, since they have the greatest impact. You may examine factors such as criticality to corporate operations, assets storing sensitive information, external-facing assets, assets subject to regulatory compliance, assets with more user accessibility, and others. This should be a dynamic process based on evolving threats and the digital landscape. Number 2. Vulnerability assessment. Identify potential system vulnerabilities. You may use automated vulnerability scanners, manual testing, or penetration testing. Several sorts of vulnerability scanners will help you, like web application scanning, network scanning, operating system, database scans, endpoint security assessments. Web application scanning to detect vulnerabilities, such as cross-site scripting, SQL injections, cross-site request forgery, etc. Network scanning can detect open ports and services, weak passwords, denial of service vulnerabilities, wireless network security flaws, and so on. Operating system scans to highlight any privilege escalation, security misconfigurations, insecure file permissions, etc. Database scans to identify any vulnerabilities, such as improper session handling, missing patches, exposed sensitive data, or unauthorized access, etc. Endpoint checks to find malware, problems with authorization, and more. If there are complicated interconnected settings, any access or segmentation problems, or both, network or application-based scanners might not be able to offer thorough coverage. For enterprises, deploying agents across all devices can be costly. Businesses can select from a range of thorough and cost-effective analytical techniques and make decisions based on particular requirements. Number 3. Vulnerability prioritization. The methodical assessment and classification of vulnerabilities according to their potential effect and exploitability, which helps businesses in determining which ones need to be handled first. It's an important step in the vulnerability management process that helps organizations. Here are some things to consider when prioritizing vulnerabilities. To rank vulnerabilities according to severity, use a CVSS mean, Common Vulnerability Scoring System score. This score is supported by a number of techniques that produce numerical values ranging from 0 to 10, where 10 represents the most serious vulnerability. The CVSS considers a number of variables before producing a score, including privileges, attack vectors, and attack complexity. We already discussed in previous lectures. It conducts a risk assessment to understand the impact and likelihood of vulnerability exploitation. Prioritize vulnerabilities by gathering threat intelligence from both internal and external sources to provide more context for the threats. Prioritization will help focus efforts on high-impact areas and reduce the overall attack surface. Number 4. Reporting. Compiling this data into reports and documentation to give to important stakeholders is the next stage. An executive summary of the vulnerability assessment report is included for management and non-technical stakeholders for review. It contains information on vulnerabilities that have been found as well as test results and all technical specifications needed by security teams. Risk assessments are used by compliance teams to prepare any compliance remedial activities. Number 5. Remediation. The action plan set in place to remove the vulnerabilities found is known as the remediation process. This requires establishing roles, communicating tasks, and creating or updating policies. Generally, low-risk vulnerabilities are ignored or given less importance. There are mitigating strategies and workarounds for others. These precautions consist of changing configurations, installing compensatory controls, applying software vendor patches, and more. And number 6 is monitoring for verification. Following the implementation of remediation measures, make sure they function as intended by doing extensive testing and follow-ups. To find out if any vulnerabilities have resurfaced or if any have been left handled, you can perform another scan. In order to support continual improvement, this is a continuous process.